And we have a great agenda coming up. Just a brief slide. We have over 16 concurrent sessions that are booked, and you can learn more about those on our website at saskleaders.com. And I wanted to feature our three plenaries here. Our focus this year is building a solutions-focused economy. And we have Lisa Helps coming in, the former mayor of Victoria, BC. She's known for her cross-sector solutions work in Victoria, now working with the Premier of BC on housing. Gary Morasti, our own Saskatchewan former MP and now CEO of Peter Ballantyne. Again, he has a vision of how we have to come together in the future, communities and nations here in Saskatchewan. And then for inspiration, we're bringing a rural entrepreneur from a small town in Montana who started her own workwear company, went on as a social entrepreneur to start an arts festival to raise funds for a rural charitable foundation. So just a brief overview of our event before we start our conversation. So again, welcome, Josh and Bert. I want to first acknowledge with what's going on in Alberta right now with the wildfire. And Bert is quite close to that situation up in Woodlands County. Are you engaged in regional emergency planning? Bert, can you talk a bit about that?
You bet. Thank you, Verona, and welcome everyone. It's wonderful to see some wonderful old friends and familiar faces all here. So yes, with Woodlands County, we have been incredibly fortunate in the municipality that I'm in. We're about 90 minutes northwest of Edmonton, and we actually border on the north edge of the number 16 highway as you're on your way to Jasper. So we're just at the north edge of Yellowhead County. You probably heard, I mean, Yellowhead has had a number of fires, and Edson has been evacuated twice. Communities to the west and north of us have also been evacuated, but those residents are currently back. So Swan Hills and Fox Creek are both to our west and to our northwest. And we've been really fortunate within Woodlands proper. We haven't had any direct incidents within Woodlands. However, the Shining Bank fire, which is one of the ones that is to the south end of us and around that number 16 highway, we were concerned about that one coming north. And so going back to about the middle of May, we did activate our emergency operations center. We have our protective services folks that have been working really closely with all of the fire efforts. Our local airport here, with smoke and with closures happening in Grand Prairie and Edson at different points throughout the event, we've ended up with some days in excess of 200 aircraft movements a day at our local airport here, which it's created a lot of activity. Fortunately, we haven't been evacuated with the town of Whitecourt, which is the main municipality that is within Woodlands, and we haven't had to evacuate any of our residents yet, but we've certainly been a reception center, and our business community stepped up in an absolutely huge way when we had evacuees here from all of those other communities.
Okay, so both Josh and Bert, just a note on that subject, do you have any proactive planning on the business resilience side in terms of, emergency preparedness and what could happen in terms of economic impact? So again, business retention and expansion, do you have your businesses diarized, contact information handy? Anything like that?
I know for us, this was actually a good exercise because I reached out to our EOC and our coordinator there and asked if anything of the like existed. And he said, no, actually not at this point. If you can forward along some additional information, that would be great. And so we're quite fortunate because I do believe it was BC and then Alberta kind of followed suit in terms of having all of the resources available. And I know SEDA and yourself have built upon it. So it's sort of started that conversation for us. We do have emergency management plan, I should say, in place. And our focus, ironically, and maybe not so much, is more on flooding and low water usage more than anything, because those are the factors that seem to affect our community more so. But definitely sending support out to Bert and his team and everybody up there. And it's opened our eyes to what we need to accomplish and the more work that we need to do. So.
Okay. Good.
And then just to echo those sentiments. I agree. I mean, it's an incredible real life sort of training exercise. What we're seeing with Edson as folks come back in is they're actually allowing the pharmacies, the gas stations, and the grocers to come back in first to get everything ready, so that those basic services are there when the residents are ready to start to come back. So we have work to do here on this end. We don't have a lot of storefront businesses within Woodlands County directly, but I know we have a lot of our industry partners that we're talking with that have either lost some infrastructure due to the fire, whether it be oil and gas or forestry, and talking even just with our family farmers on how can you be a little bit fire smart and take part in the provincial fire smart program and some of those things. So it certainly elevates a lot of those conversations on being prepared.
Yeah, it's something we all need to pay more attention to. So I want to move on to talk a bit about planning. Now, I noticed that both the county and the town, in your case, Josh, you both have 5-year strategic plans. Wonder if we could talk a bit about the advantages that your leadership have found in investing time and resources in a strategic plan, and how does that differ from an OCP? Bert, you want to start off the conversation?
Sure. So I know for us, the strategic plan, the idea is with our Alberta elections, councils are now elected for a 4-year term. That was changed a couple of election cycles ago. And so the idea is you don't want to plan too far ahead into the future, but you want to make sure that you've got a plan for your term. And so that was where we saw a lot of municipalities move from 3-year to 5-year plans. We actually just did on Monday and Tuesday of this week a bit of an annual review of our strategic plan. Our council set it so the election would have been about 18 months ago, and then about a year ago we have the plan that they put forward now, and we did a little bit of tweaking to it. And then the partnering part of the strategic plan for us is we actually have a tactical business plan, which actually gives some of the achievables under each of those points. And so the idea was to update both the tactical business plan on what's been accomplished and what's left to accomplish, and to determine, is the strategy still right, or were there tweaks and things that needed to happen. And one of the things that directly affects me, so when we put this plan forward, we actually included tourism with economic development for the first time. But our intent is not to be a tourism marketing agency, but a tourism development agency. And so on our strategic plan for Woodlands County, the little change we made, and it's only moving 2 words around, but it's a really big difference in what it means, is we're now pursuing it's strategic economic and tourism development. Whereas before Monday it was strategic economic development and tourism. It very much limits where we're going to act, which is on the tourism development piece, same as we would with any other business development.
Okay, so it sounds like your strategic plan is very action oriented and drills down into the various subsectors such as housing, transportation, economic development. Okay, and Josh, can we talk about your approach, and does it include neighboring communities?
Yes and no. Okotoks loves plans. We've got a lot of plans in place. I think, kind of referencing back to your previous question, the official community plan is sort of equivalent to the municipal development plan, I think. So our MDP looks about 60 years out. It is a very high-level document that guides everything planning. It's very much land use planning and development, but it touches on all aspects of the community. And so in order to drill down on that and really ensure that administration is focusing on what they need to, the 5-year strategic plan is put in place. So it's more actionable items. It breaks down sort of the core focuses for the town, right? So similar to what Bert said, you're looking at what we can focus on and we can achieve in the short term, right? Taking into context what an MDP, so the long-term planning would be. I think the other key component for that, and at least for Okotoks, is that engagement is a key priority for them, for council, I should say. And so the 5-year strategic plan allows our council, who was recently elected, I guess 2 years ago this fall, to go to the public, ask the questions, and ensure that they're really representing their constituents, and then drill that stuff down for administration. In terms of what Bert mentioned with his tactical business plan, we have a further plan. So MDP, strategic plan, we have a corporate business plan, which breaks it down even further into actionable steps and what we can report back on. When we look at sort of the regional piece, there's 2 sort of key components that we have in place. One would be the CMRB, so the Calgary Metropolitan Regional Board, as well as there is it's called a TDX or TDZ, I believe, and my colleague works on this, but it's the tourism focus for the Foothills County and everybody within that region. So there's definitely a high level lens that's applied to a lot of things and a lot of different stakeholders that come to the table whom we meet with to make sure we're achieving those regional goals.
So Okotoks is not part of a REDA, a Regional Economic Development Authority?
No.
Woodlands is, correct, Bert?
Yes, that's correct. We're part of the Growth REDA, and we're in the process. We actually have a REDA meeting going on downstairs as I speak. So we're in the process of kind of working and growing our regional partnerships for sure.
Do you see any direct benefit then? The REDAs, my understanding are there's some core funding provided by the province for the REDAs. Do you see direct benefit as a member or participant within your REDA?
Yes. So the provincial funding over the years has kind of fluctuated up and down, much as it did back in the day when we had the alliances within Saskatchewan and all of that. And so the recent sort of blow that happened to the REDAs would have been, I think, 2019, 2020, right around the beginning of the pandemic, was their annual funding was reduced to about 50,000. And last fall, we saw that come back a bit. So we're back to, if you have a REDA in place and if you're filing your paperwork and doing everything properly that you need to do with jobs, economy, and northern development, what happens is you get $125,000 in funding from the province toward the REDA. And then, of course, that is on top of what you generate through memberships, other fee for services, other things that you're doing. And that gives you a bit of a working budget to be able to work on some of those bigger regional projects that maybe one community or one municipality can't quite handle on their own.
Okay, good. So that's a good lead into housing, because that's a big challenge, of course, across the country. And maybe this is something that your REDA plays into. Josh, I wanted to start with you. I mean, your community has seen a large increase in population, and I'm assuming housing needs. How are you handling this growth? Talk a bit about your strategy, et cetera.
Housing's a significant concern for Okotoks. We draw a lot of, I guess a lot of our workforce migrates outside of the community, roughly 2/3. But we have an increasing need for, it's attainable housing is what it is, right? So I have to build a bit of context with this too, if that's okay. But Okotoks does one thing really well, and that's actually retail investment. We've done quite well. And so the type of folks who work in those industries don't tend to have as high of an attainable income for the housing. And so it's sort of this chicken and egg that we have. We recognize that fairly early on. And so we've made some significant changes, both through the update to our MDP as well as our land use bylaw. And like specifically, we took in our land use bylaw, we dropped from 9 residential districts to 2. So allowing housing's more allowable in the districts, if you will. And within those districts, regardless of form, housing is permitted. So really what it is looking at cutting the barriers and the red tape, as we like to call it, to make it easier for our development officer to approve these. In conjunction with that, we've been reviewing sort of our processes and allowing for a greater e-permitting process so that everything can be applied for online, reviewed online, and approved online, so that it can go from point A to point B quite quickly. And as we build all of this out, it also requires sort of looking at multifamily and how easy it is to build multifamily and how to encourage multifamily developments, because we need more of them in the community.
Okay. Okay. I think we may have lost Bert there for a moment. So we'll continue on. So in terms of what we've noticed here in Saskatchewan, because we've been doing some industry assessment, is we've noticed rural industry is really asking for a 3-tier housing approach. One is very, very temporary housing so that they can hire on a temporary basis, to go through the probationary 3 months. Then secondly, they're again, rentals, multifamily dwellings is their second request, and residential single family long-term. Do you have any focus on the first two? Again, multifamily dwelling, it sounds like that's a focus. Anything on, and again, if your population is more retail oriented, that might not be a demand, I suppose.
No. There absolutely is. But so I hate to say it, obviously, but the elephant in the room being that Okotoks is a bedroom community, and so a lot of the development previous to this, scenario has been single-family homes, large backyards, the things that we tend to do well in our bedroom communities. But that lifestyle and quality of life is more more desirable, especially with the advent of digital communications, being able to do your meetings online, not having to go into the office. So the uptake and the demand for a variety of housing has increased. And so one of the key things outside of those changes to the land use bylaw and the MDP has been, we actually have a position dedicated solely to affordable housing. Internally, we call it affordable. I like to consider it attainable housing. But more to like the rental piece, we have a secondary suite and accessory dwelling grant program whereby we offer up to $10,000 as an incentive to build those types of structures. So It's one kind of key piece, but I know we always have a finger on the pulse looking to what we can do to continue to further address it, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. So is Bert rejoined us?
He has not.
He has not. Okay. So then let's just continue, Josh. Let's talk a bit about rural and urban. So, you in Alberta, you've got the big two, the Calgary and Edmonton. And here we see sometimes a competition between rural Saskatchewan and our two big urbans. So do you have any advice based on your proximity to Calgary?
Oh, yeah. I mean, my situations are dissimilar, and I do notice a few previous colleagues on the call, but obviously being in Mormon, I actually liken Mormon to Saskatoon as Okotoks is to Calgary, right? Fast growing communities on the outskirts of the big sort of metropolises of the provinces relatively. So it took me probably a good 2 years to really understand how to approach this type of question, because investment attraction was huge for Mormon. For Okotoks, our focus is that, but a little bit different as well. And I think the big thing for anybody on the call who's interested, for me, it's stuff you already know, but the big thing is understanding what your value proposition as a community is. What is it that you really do well as opposed to anybody else? Because there's a reason that you're growing. There's a reason people want to be there comparative to Saskatoon, Regina, Edmonton, Calgary, whatever it may be. Understanding that allows you to capture the true essence of what sets you apart. And when you do that, you can start to build out your competitive advantage, if you will, regardless of what you're looking at. If that's industry, if that's, retail, if that's small commercial development, entrepreneurship, tourism, whatever. The next point for me that I've found to help me in my role, I guess, and I've been really successful, is understand your movers and shakers. So we should all know that reinvestment in the community is typically the number one area where you're going to see new investment, right? From current business owners, people living in the community, anything like that. So be involved in the community. I can't stress the BR&E kind of aspects enough. Know who's working in your community, what they're doing. I always like to say, you never know where an opportunity might exist, right? So have those conversations regardless of what they look like. The work is important. I think to that end, depending on what your relationship with your developers are, what that looks like, developers are key. If you can find one or two key developers that are, if they're in the community, that's bonus points, because I find that if you're working with somebody who sees what happens, on the month to month or even week to week, it's key. They can see and feel the momentum, but also get to know and have a good, reputable real estate professional on hand. Find somebody that you trust working with, right? It's so important to run ideas by. Oftentimes we're looking at novel solutions to age-old problems, right? Quote unquote, thinking outside the box, if you will. So those are kind of the key components on how to compete with the big guys, because you're never going to be able to compete on some of the aspects, right? Typically it's access to talent, it's access to traffic counts of population, which some people want, it's access to transportation networks, all the likes. Figure out what makes you different, find the people that want to build on that, and you'll do well.
Okay. Now I just had a text from Bert, his Zoom crashed, so he's trying to get back on. But I want to talk a bit about business retention and expansion. So you mentioned BR&E. For those folks who are with us, BR&E is the acronym for business retention and expansion. And it's something that SEDA encourages quite ad nauseum, actually. And it's really about talking to your local businesses on an ongoing basis to determine what their challenges are and what their opportunities. And we just finished as part of a provincial project, we We talked to 65 small to large businesses, not a lot, but 65, and they were in rural areas, and we were excited to do so because in some of those areas they don't have a developer or staff on the ground that is assigned to that task. And we, again, within that 65, we noticed that 2 of them were planning to leave, right? And for the reasons that, and one of them is quite a large employer. And common challenges across the province, common opportunities that we could all be perhaps trying to tackle. So that's my little commercial on business retention and expansion. But now that you're in Alberta, Josh, are you engaged? And I imagine you are on an ongoing basis with your business.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. It's key to what we do. I think we want to build on the success of the businesses that are already here, and we have a fairly robust business visitation program that includes a grand opening program, really celebrating the business successes. To me, it's about those touch points, right? So when a business opens, you from start to finish to aftercare, making sure that you're in constant communication. And we actually just finished, I don't have the results yet, I wrapped up a business satisfaction survey, so distributed to the entire community. We didn't get everybody, but we got a really good number, asking those hard questions. How's your business doing? What can we do to support you? Where do you see yourself? So that we can have that baseline for metrics. And it is going to be a yearly thing where we go back and keep up to date. So it's really big for us. Yeah.
And for folks that are interested, for our members and partners, we really specialize in coaching. SEDA does, in terms of we coach on business retention, expansion, and we provide resources to help you in that process. Now, Bert is back. Now, Bert, this is perfect because we're ready to talk about investment attraction now.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Josh, that was absolutely incredible. I came back in and I could feel the vibe of all the great stuff you were putting down, man.
It goes from a keynote presentation to a panel, so it's all yours now.
All right. Well, I'll do my best to not let the panel and the group down.
So investment attraction. So I know this is your bailiwick, and especially site selection in Saskatchewan. And Josh will be familiar with this. For the last 10 to 12 years, the province of Saskatchewan has really taken a lot of responsibility for investment attraction on a global scale, and they still do. So we don't see a lot of smaller centers focusing on that. Can you give us some advice based on your best practices and what you're up to?
You bet. So I have to admit, this is something that, there were a few good things that came out of the pandemic. And I have to admit that for me, this was one of them. What happened is, of course, because all of the in-person conferences were canceled and that sort of thing, I actually ended up having a chance to kind of virtually meet a couple of site selectors. And so that was kind of incredibly interesting, because it isn't often at the municipal perspective that, you kind of have the opportunity to build those relationships. And so there's a gentleman by the name of Paige Webster. He runs a company called Webster Global. And Deshay, if you want to share it, what I was able to do was to work with him. He's hosted several SiteLink Forum conferences. I think he had at that point about 15 or something like that he'd hosted throughout the US. And the intent of SiteLink is what they do. It gives you an opportunity to bring in 6 or 7 site selectors directly to your community. But the focus is on smaller communities and smaller markets. And so as I was going through and having my conversations with Paige, he says, well, I've never actually held one of these in Canada. And that might be a really neat thing for us in order to, say we're fully international and all of that. And I said, well, okay, that might be interesting for us to do too. What are the sectors we could look at? And, there was a lot of behind the scenes discussions and different things. And then we realized that, there really would be a possibility to host a SiteLink forum here locally. And so we started to work with a lot of our surrounding municipalities, some of our local industries, to determine the level of interest, get the partners together to be able to make it meaningful for everybody. And I'm really happy to say that last year in June, we hosted the first SiteLink Forum ever in Canada. And it was the first time that we'd brought 7 site selectors. We actually had one of the guys had COVID, so we only had 6 here, but into a small rural community and area. And we had a chance to talk all about Northwest Alberta and the advantages of doing business here and talking about the economy and all of that. And so that was really great. And then from that, a friend of mine, John Anderson, and John had worked in Lloydminster previously, and I think is a former SEDA member as well. John was in Lac La Biche at the time, and there was the ability for Lac La Biche County to take a look at hosting this year. And now we actually have, over the course of the next 3 or 4 years, SiteLink will be coming into Alberta about once a year in order to showcase different parts of the province and do different things. So it really is an amazing opportunity to kind of work with and bring site selectors directly to you. So the question, who are site selectors and what do they do? Well, they generally work either on their own or they're part of larger companies such as investment firms, investment banks, that sort of thing. There's only really about 200 to 300 of them across North America. And they're often the ones that, if there's a company that's looking to relocate or put in a really large expansion or that sort of thing, it will somehow in some way be on their radar. So they're really important people to be able to engage with, so that at least if nothing else, you get an understanding of, what's the perception of your community in your region, what are your strengths and weaknesses that you can market, what are some of the things you can do to go after projects of various sizes. I mean, they might not all be million or $billion projects. It might just be a small mom and pop operation that's looking for a second location, right? I mean, there's projects of various sizes. So don't be intimidated by site selectors. And we do have the next SiteLink Forum. He's hosting 2 a year now, and we just finished the one in Lac La Biche about 2 weeks ago. But the next one will be in Roswell, New Mexico. So yeah, if you have an opportunity to connect with site selectors or to follow them on LinkedIn and learn a little bit more about them, it is incredibly interesting to be able to up your economic development game, even just by sort of following the announcements in the news. And I encourage everybody to be able to get to know and rub some elbows with site selectors.
So how do you, let's link that into your online website presence and marketing. So how important is that based on your firsthand experience with site selectors? What should communities be profiling? What kind of contact information or contact utility on their website? Could Josh or Bert, could either of you comment on that?
So sure, I'll very quickly go, and then I'll hand it back over to you, Josh. So having a direct name of a person to contact is really important, because I mean, you're dealing with people, right? So going, oh, hey, info at ecdev at my community. Well, that's great, but it's a lot better if you say, call Ted. Right. So I think that's one of the things, because you want to start building that interpersonal relationship as quickly as you can. The other thing is make sure you have an investment profile. I mean, it doesn't have to be a 30-page document, even if it's only a 2-page summary of here's the basics on our community, here's the really cool things we have that might be of interest to somebody. Great way to start. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, and I can't agree more with the investment profile. And it's still a person-to-person business, right? So that direct contact makes a huge difference. Even if you throw up a photo, anything to set yourself apart. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, it goes down to marketing yourself, right? And I go back to that idea of that value proposition or our competitive advantage. Make it clear, explain it, and get it out there and get it to people who need to find it, right? And I think that's wonderful that you're bringing people in, Bert, because you're bringing them to the apex where they need to be, and you're showing them that value. In the absence of being able to do that, as Bert mentioned, if you can find them and send it to them because they're busy and they have competing interests, show them why it's best for them to come to your community, and it could work out like it did with Bert, actually, which is awesome.
I do notice that many communities, just because we're in the digital age, we tend to have that automatic submission form on our website with no email, because we're trying to minimize spam. But it's really the worst thing we can do if you want to attract business to the community, is folks do not want to be sending confidential information into an input form on the website, right? Yet having a telephone number, an email, and a name or a picture is the way to go. So to close the discussion on the site selection, on your experience, so Bert, have you had any direct impact or other communities do you feel from this endeavor of yours?
Yes, so we actually had 3 or 4 really strong leads that came out of hosting our site selectors here, and we've still got 1 or 2 of those that we're still working on, right? Unfortunately, it is not a quick or a very straightforward linear process. It is an economic development process, and we all know what that's like. But it is part of the sales process. So the more people that know about you and the stronger relationships you have with people that might have projects that might fit your region, the better off you are. So it's a long game kind of a thing, but it's a great way to build and develop relationships and to promote your community.
Okay, before we open it up to Q&A, I want to circle back because we lost you for a bit, Bert. Are you doing anything in the housing sector? Anything that, because you're working on a semi-regional basis, anything that you might want to share?
So we do have actually within Woodlands both our family and community support services, and then we actually have a community services department. So housing falls more so to them. We have in the past kind of done housing studies and those sorts of things, and we have with a local developer on a regional basis just had a new 100-unit seniors residence that's been opened up, and so that was something that was a long-term goal. It took quite a few years to get that project put together. So nothing that I'm working on directly, but certainly those are things that are of regional concern, and we've had different folks working on them in different ways.
Okay, thanks so much. And so Deshay, let's open it up for questions. Do we have anything in the chat, or do folks want to have a conversation with our guests?
I don't have any questions in the chat, and I just said if you'd like to unmute, please let me know, just so we don't have everybody unmuting at the same time to ask a question. So I'll just watch the chat for those.
Are we able to turn up? Oh, here we're able to turn up some of those websites that Bert mentioned, or
yeah, the
maybe...
site link forum should be in there.
Okay.
And then the one that's really exciting to me, and it's kind of neat being a Saskatchewan prairie boy and moving up into the forest, and you hear about the fur trade when you're going through school, but it's actually kind of interesting to be here and really experience it. And we do actually have the first bicentennial to be celebrated in Alberta. We're celebrating for one of our communities called Fort Assiniboine this year. It was a Hudson's Bay trading post that was founded in 1823 on the Athabasca River, and so we've got a 3 days worth of events. We have a Voyager canoe brigade with about 20 canoes. It's going to be coming ashore. We have a whole bunch of Métis and Indigenous entertainment, and kind of a little 3-day community celebration. So in our little hamlet of Fort Assiniboine of just under 300 people, we've sold over 1,200 tickets for our 3 days. So we're really looking at having some fun. Yeah.
That sounds like a good TRC opportunity. I do want to slide a question in on projects, because I did hear through the grapevine that the province of Alberta was providing feasibility support for projects to communities, economic development projects. Did I hear correctly? Is that something that is an opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I can jump in here. I can't remember the name of the actual grant, but we've successfully applied for a grant to help develop our next economic development strategic plan, actually. So we successfully applied for that last year and are going through the process of RFPing it right now. And so it can be anything from a full-blown project, like something that is in the works and going through. Maybe it's a business satisfaction survey, just to use the low-hanging fruit, or something that could just be a plan that you're working on as well. So yeah.
All right. Any other opportunities that funding opportunities or programs that you've capitalized on offered by the province of Alberta?
I can let Bert jump in. I don't have anything off the cuff aside from for us on the infrastructure side. So this is less of an economic development thing, but the province did partner with us to help expand a water line from the Bow River. So Okotoks will be receiving its first dedicated water line from the Bow, which is a massive massive opportunity for us moving forward. So, but that's more of a infrastructure side of things with the NEC dev component. So.
Yeah, sorry, and not a lot of kind of provincially funded or partnered on projects here for us with Woodlands right at the moment. It's certainly interesting because we do have some new investment partners, and so Invest Alberta is a relatively new agency. They're an arm's length from government, but funded by the government group, designed to go out and help to generate projects and contacts for all of us across Alberta and Alberta communities, with a big focus on innovation. And so it's interesting to see sort of what they have going on, and they actually have some local investment readiness programs that we're actually working with them to try and get one of those run locally here this fall. And then of course through Prairies Can, when we saw the changes to WED, it was interesting to see, and I wasn't sure myself whether it was going to be a good thing or a bad thing, but it seems like there are some new programs and some different things open through Prairies Can. And so if you don't have good contact with your Prairies Can reps, some of them are probably relatively new as well. So it's a great opportunity to build a good relationship there and understand exactly what they're up to.
Okay. So a question from our audience: any tips or examples on how to promote tourism development? I think this is probably up Bert's alley, knowing his past.
Thank you. And yeah, I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, and thanks Verona for the lead in there. This is one of my favorite things to talk about, so I'll keep it really short. But I encourage you to go to the Town of Kipling website. Kipling was the very first community that I worked in, and take a look at the information they have on the One Red Paperclip trade. You can take a look at oneredpaperclip.com as well. That was kind of the official site. But yeah, way back in 2006, we made 503 Main Street one of the most famous residences in Saskatchewan, when we had a gentleman that we traded a house on Main Street in Kipling for a role in a movie, and that was sort of the final trade in the Red Paperclip saga. So it's been interesting to see how the community has evolved with it since then, because the Paperclip House is now a local restaurant, and they've got a little museum and the world's biggest red paperclip and some different things. It's actually been really neat to see the legacy of that, 15 years on, and to see that the people in Kipling are still really proud of that. So always look for those unique opportunities for communities. But we also have regionally through our Growth Rita, the Wild Alberta website. And we actually just have our brand new tourism guide for this year is out, as well as we were able to get some tourism relief funding, the TRF grant through Prairies Can, to help us to rebuild and market and help a lot of our local operators. So if you have a chance to check out that wildalberta.com website, that's kind of what we've been up to on the tourism side.
Thanks. Any comments, Josh?
Tourism's handled largely by my colleague, but what I can say, and it kind of goes back to what you originally spoke of about regional partnerships, we looked at our capacity and what we could do and what others are doing quite well. And Foothills Tourism had a significant grant from the province of Alberta to look at the Foothills region, if you will, which we're part of. We're the largest municipality in it, if I'm not mistaken, and find sort of those synergies where we can help support them, support us. So I did put the link in the chat as well, and you can see some of the stuff that they're doing. And they've looked at things in a whole bunch of different ways outside of just conventional marketing. So going online, doing printouts, right? So doing your guides and whatnot. So they did have a program, and I'm not sure how much it's being utilized right now, to drill down sort of the businesses that are in your community and who's visiting them and what that looks like, to sort of have more of an evidence-based approach. So not my forte. I think Bert did an awesome job explaining it, but yeah, look in your backyard. If there's a way to sort of combine your resources, it's worth it, because yeah.
Super. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, and Deshay, I don't see any, I think we'll thank our guests, and I hope to see both of you one of these days soon, either in Saskatchewan or Alberta. Thank you all for attending today. Our next webinar was planned for next week. We do have to reschedule due to one of our speakers, their availability. So right now we're setting a new date in July. And when we have that, we'll send that out to any folks who had registered for next week and promote that. And again, don't forget to register for our conference. Early bird deadline's coming up the end of this month. Thank you all for attending, and we will be posting a recording of this session as soon as we can on the webinar webpage on the SEDA website. Thanks again, you two. I miss you.
I miss you too, and thank you so much. And it only seems appropriate I have to end on these two words. Oh, I'll go that way. Go Riders.
Take care.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Carrie, it's good to see you.